Hello, everybody. Hope everyone is clear to see what we're going to watch today. um, yeah, I queued that up, and the music immediately changed to something light and happy, and I was like, it just ruins the entire effect. But hello. Thanks for everybody wandering in. I know we've always started just a little bit late, so today. I haven't slept since the last show. Well, I'm ahead of somebody for a change. Um, I got to put. All right. Before we get started, just a little spiel. I started putting some of these streams up on YouTube. I know they have like uh, I know the streams up there have audio problems. I'm not entirely sure what the problem is. They're already peaking on my end, so I can't stop this process to figure out which step is causing that issue. As near as I can tell, it's mostly okay for the actual live stream. So, but party to that, the fact that I can't stop to fix that is, I feel it especially today. I don't feel very well prepared for what we're doing today. But if I'm honest with you, I haven't felt prepared, not a single day. In a lot of ways, this was too much to bite off. With all of the little things, little snafus that have held things up. So I'm sorry. So I'm more prepared for some parts of the day than others. But we will get through this. There's a lot in these episodes today. I appreciate the vote of confidence, but I have not felt equal to the task. And I think it is going back and watching. Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate that it's at least somewhat enjoyable. Going back and creating the streams put up on YouTube, it's clear. You can see my comfort level when I'm not working from the notes versus just spinning off the top of my head. I think that just speaks to how unprepared I felt for all these individual episodes. And today will be all over the map. For some of these, I'm more prepared than others. We're going to do our best. But that aside, today we start with 21-22 right now. Probably because of feeling unprepared, I won't do much of a spoiler-free chat after that. I'll just let you talk with each other and chat if you want to. And then after that break, we'll do 23 and 24. This sets us up for tomorrow. Tomorrow, same schedule starting, okay? And we'll do 25 and 26, okay? The original kind of two-part finale to the series. Then there will be... The second part will start an hour later, which, if we stay on time, which we'll try, will be actually a 2.5-hour break. And that's the second half we'll be talking about the first movie, which is originally Death and Rebirth, and it's called Death True Squared in the Netflix thing. I still don't know what the difference will be, honestly. But that is mostly recap. And so what that session will be, that second session tomorrow, we'll look at deviations from the recap versus the 26 we just went through. But that's not probably enough to make an entire episode out of. So what that second session tomorrow will mostly be is a giant kind of retrospective of that original run, the 26, before we get to End of Evangelion. So kind of a last chance to clear up interpretations or questions about everything that came to that point to try to get as much on the same page as possible before End of Evangelion on Sunday, which we'll go. It's a full movie. I'm not yet sure how to deal with a division that large. But at that point, all spoiler restrictions will be off anyway. So we will go, and we will just keep going into that'll essentially go until I can't go any further, basically. So at some point, I'm sure we'll be done talking about Evangelion itself. Yeah. So that's the plan for tomorrow. That is the deal with today as well, um, and then Sunday. So again, that second thing tomorrow, that second broadcast, even though it's essentially a recap, right? Even though that is essentially, um, yeah, sorry, yes, yeah, we are gonna do End of Evangelion. That's kind of like the grand finale of all this. Is Sunday. It's the only thing on that day, and we'll just go. Um, So basically, tomorrow, second session, is a big chance for anyone to catch up, ask questions, clear things up, even things I might not be clear on myself. So, but yes, no End of Evangelion spoilers in that point. It'll all be about the original run of the show. So, yeah, I know. You all kept watching. I put the warning up there. So, the UN comes knocking on your door. You know, I'm not culpable in this. All right, that wasn't too terribly long of a opening spiel, I guess. Um, let us get to the brass tacks here. Okay, so episode 21. For the first time in an entire series, we have a scene that runs before the opening credits. That is the first time that happens, and it'll actually happen again next episode. Um, this doesn't just emphasize that the events in the security footage happened before our story, like it happens before the intro, but also kind of disrupts the flow that we've gotten used to. We had 20 episodes of just going straight from the opening into um, into the actual show. And now, without any warning, we are dumped right into this footage. It's pretty effective, right? It definitely disrupts what we expected. But that also sets up the tone for where we are in the series right now. The show practically sprints to the final two episodes from here, because we've had all this very slow, methodical teasing out of lore and history and all that, and it just completely accelerates. And this episode especially, where we have three different people whose memories we dip into, right? Um, that said, even in this security footage where we get this kind of technobabble dump, there is a little bit of obscuring, right? Because we don't see who's talking, we don't get the context. It's just a dump of technobabble, things that are referred to, but we don't actually find out much about, right? There's a lot of just terms that are just thrown around, and we just have to check them out when or remember them and hope we find out more later. We do get our S2 engine finally named on screen. This super solenoid seems to be where the name of that comes from. We learn, I mean, we knew it already because it was referred to as the Katsuragi expedition, but we see that Misato's estranged father is kind of the one who was doing this work. So he is involved in this, and yeah, the show. You're saying the show is in serious mode now, and so anyway, there's a whole bunch through this that we're not going to go through every little part of it, right? But what there I think is kind of interesting is in the middle of this, there's this debate about its validity versus the does it need to be proven if it's right in front of you? And there is this little, all those voices we're hearing are pretty sure those are all scientists that are present here, and so none of them survive. But there is this little exchange here in the middle that I didn't go look the credits for that, but I feel like it's probably like some of the Zila members, or at least one of them. And what they're actually talking about is how scientists are talking about dogma and the faith in their beliefs, and just show it here. There's a contrast drawn between the assumptions of scientists, right? Their assumptions are too deeply ingrained. They're even referred to as being dogmatic, right? And yeah, it for sure sounds like the Chairman Keel, the Zila seems to be the leader. And what I guess is kind of interesting, they're talking about how these deeply held assumptions interfere with their ability to perceive reality, right? That scientists who are supposed to be the pursuers of truth fail in this, or kind of ironically, it's undermined because of their deeply held assumptions. Like I say, it's dogmatic. And they go on to, there's kind of a scathing indictment here, right? Where they talk about how it's not noble, that they are in it for their own joy of discovery and the dominance that understanding brings them, and that they're doing for their own self-gratification, right? So this is taking the scientific pursuit, which is often lauded and often put on a pedestal as something that's purer, right? And instead, treating it like almost like religious, or like dogma, or like fanaticism, that they are so deep in their assumptions of the world and how they view the world that it interferes with their actual ability to see reality. And I find especially the use of dogma interesting in what is obviously a criticism, because we know that NERV has adopted dogma into their naming scheme. Like most of the time we spent in NERV headquarters, we've been in central dogma or terminal dogma, the place way below where Adam seems to be held. And so despite this judgment, yeah, exactly, terminal dogma, end of dogma, or central dogma. But I think it's interesting now we see this this criticism of dogmatic belief, and then they made that they made the idea that the assumptions, assuming a certain way the world works, and the validity of your own belief, a central part of their naming scheme, right? And so that it's not just a naming scheme, right? That it's that whether you should have an unshakable belief in science or your conclusions or not is something they are beginning with. There's an assumption that they want to be a background reminder of what they're about, right? Anyway, there are a few actual little details we can pick up from this. We see them talk about how there was DNA inserted into Adam and has undergone a physical fusion, and that's the first thing that seems to cause the panic and cause everything to cascade out of way. There's mention of the spear, which we can pretty well guess is the spear of Longinus, right? And then there is a reference to gates of Guff. Is that Goof? Oh man, I don't know. I should look up how that's pronounced. An anti-AT field, and then spreading of wings, which is something we had seen before in Misato's memory of all this, right? The gates of Goof, I don't know. We won't worry about that. That comes up again. It is several of these things, due to the pattern, the way the series has set us up to expect how it handles its technobabble. We will hear something, right? It'll be introduced, or the term will be thrown around, and then we can count on some point later they will actually explain a little more. They will actually elucidate further. So for now, we are obviously just being confused on purpose, but we know that there's kind of a pattern. Yes, there's that anti-AT field. So we come away from this getting a tantalizing peek inside what happened. And we know we're seeing for the first time the history of NERV and how it came to be. And we get just as many questions as answers, maybe more questions. Yeah, and so someone's linked the Wikipedia on Goof. It definitely is another one of these religious terms or iconography that is being chosen on purpose, right? And anyway, when it comes up again, it's a little more clear how it relates, so we won't worry about it right now. And, this rolls us right into the credits, right? So we don't even we were separated from that to the actual series to, again, remind us they happened very different times and places. Um, in the episode proper, we begin with Kaji trying to reach Misato, and we don't get to hear it. Um, we just see he called and didn't get her, but this is probably where he leaves the message that actually plays at the end. So you have that phone call and her listening to it essentially form the runtime of this series, or this episode rather. Um, so knowing what it says at the end, and looking back and realizing he makes that call before he does this one last job means he knew, right? Um, and so he goes into it, and we catch up to where we discover Fuyotsuki's has been kidnapped, and because of putting it right beside Kaji's one last job, it's believable that he is the culprit, right? And Misato is able to be professional and compliant in all this, despite what she must be feeling. And of course, the rest of the episode we get a taste of what she's feeling. But at least in this actual moment, she is the professional, right? When it comes to work stress, when she's on the job, when she's got that mask up, she has it together, right? So there's just it's a minor thing to show her like this, but from this moment on, she is under this dread the whole day, right? So yeah. Anyway, I think that's an interesting way of giving us just a tiny taste. Now, as it turns out, the kidnappers are actually Zila, who need answers. An uninterrupted chat, I believe, is how they call it. And Zila is. They seem to need information from him, but they're really just asking him questions. But the nature of their questions creates a situation in Fuyotsuki's taking trip down memory lane. So it ends up being him that we see a lot of these events through. And it's kind of a fascinating reveal. Like, we've gotten kind of used to the Fuyotsuki we know in the present. And because he always seems, other than the few moments where he and Gendo debate sort of metaphysical matters, he always seems more like an extension of Gendo's will. And so, yeah, I agree. Of all the people to see this through, Fuyotsuki is such an interesting choice, but he's also not the person we've expected to be when we actually go back in time with him, right? What actually triggers the memory, Zeal has a little information here. It's not that, it's again cryptic references. We have no intention of creating a new god, and we want your assistance, but they're trying to. Honestly, I came away from this wondering, what was Zeal actually after? Like, why did they need this? What was the end goal of grilling him? But what actually triggers it is finding out, it's calling him Fuyotsuke's sensei. And he remembers the people used to call him that. And you can see that he, well, I went too fast, yeah. That it's pleasant. That it's like there's a nostalgic going back to, that those were, something about those days is still very pleasant to him, right? I think it's fascinating to find out that he was just a professor. That he was a workaholic professor, apparently, or at least one of those who's not, doesn't prioritize social engagement. We have a few things where the students are urging him to come out because he never does. He's supposed to do it every once in a while, and his colleagues will weigh into that he doesn't seem to prioritize relationships. And during that whole conversation, we have this lovely little kind of bait and switch. Again, this whole episode changes a lot of how we understand characters, right? Um, and there's this reference to this a student with a fascinating report, a student named Ikari, and we're of course, oh, we recognize that name. That's Gendo's name. But of course, eh, it's not Gendo, right? Um, it's Yui Ikari, and I'm pretty sure this is the first time we actually see her entirely, right? Yeah, exactly. It seems like, oh, this is going to be how he meets Gendo, and no, this is how he meets Yui, and Ikari is her name. Um, so that's a delightful kind of switch, and suddenly you realize Yui is not just her. How she figures into all this is not just she's Gendo's wife and Shinji's mother, right? So, yeah, they're definitely playing on our. I guess they're probably playing on our assumptions that Gendo and Brilliant Professor is going to be a guy, but also just we know that usually the male name becomes the family name. Um, yeah, there's like a little bit of. It's definitely the first time we've gotten a clear image of her being a character, though. Um, and on top of that, we learn that Fyosuke's how he gets into all this is not through Gendo, but through Yui, right? That's what actually draws him into all this. Um, and one of the very first things we learn about her as a character, not just that she's a brilliant scientist, enough to get his attention, and obviously get him connected to all this, but when he's trying to figure out what will you do, private sector, or maybe work in a lab, an option he doesn't even throw in there, which is that maybe she'll start a family, assuming she meets the right person. So at that moment, she isn't actually involved, right? She, right at the moment we're really discovering that she's a scientist herself in her own right, and enough to have gotten Fyosuke's attention in the first place, she is also putting motherhood as an equal option, right? That being a mother is not like a she's not the kind of she's not like Risco, right? So our example of scientist woman in the series to this point is Risco, who clearly just seems to be a scientist and otherwise kind of social relationships are a throwaway. And that's how a lot of scientific, women who are advanced in career don't consider, or we're expected to anticipate they won't have much of a family priority. But here, from the very onset, she puts that up as an equal option. Yes, she is the opposite of all the work obsessed scientists that we meet. Even Fyosuke in this moment, because the first thing we learn about him as professor is that he is too much into his work, doesn't prioritize social relationships. I don't know. It's an interesting thing. It's very deliberate to make that be our first impression, right? That's a very key rapid characterization of a character who we don't have much of a picture of her, right? We just have other people's reactions to her and the gulf she creates in Shinji. And so to learn that she was the scientist who got his attention in the first place, but prioritizes being family oriented in contrast to essentially everyone else. I mean, she's set up as almost the rejection almost of everyone else. All the characters we are familiar with to this point. Anyway, let's move her along. There's some other things Zila talks about here. The Unit 1 assimilates the S2 drive. It's now attained, whatever he says, absolute existence. And they're basically, to them, Unit 1 is now a manifest god, a god manifest. So, but more to the point, that's not what they wanted, right? Like, they're upset at this turn of events. So that is not their goal, but even worse to them is that they can't let such a thing fall into Gendo's hands. And so they're asking, this is why I'm kind of confused about what they want. They're asking Fyosuke whether they can trust him or not. Have we had this answered already? Like, isn't it pretty clear they don't trust him? Isn't it pretty much... Doesn't this scene right here say all that? So someone else said that maybe they're just issuing a warning to Gendo through Fyosuke. I mean, I can believe that. You know, that seems like a... that would make this seem a little less... Yeah, can we trust him? Exactly. It's very much a rhetorical thing. But that does prompt us to go back into Fyosuke's memory, and we get to see him actually meet Gendo. And his first impression is of a guy that he's, I don't know, bailing out of jail, released into his custody, seems to be the deal. And everything about his first impression... gone too far. Everything about his first impression of Gendo is kind of negative. I mean, you definitely we knew he was going to meet people, and they defied our expectations of how he would feel about Yui, and then, or meeting who he even meets first, and how he meets Gendo. And now his expectation, since we know he works with Gendo, this again defies what we expect. And you can see, suddenly Fyosuke's the times when he's debating with Gendo that we've seen don't seem so out of place anymore, right? But Gendo, at least, seems to be in character. Like, he doesn't seem different, right? Because he's, like he says here, he doesn't like to be liked, that he's used to being an outcast. And so now, when we talked about some of his actions in the last few episodes, one of the things is he doesn't seem to care what other people think. And this is, you know, from the horse's mouth, right? You know, especially we talked about his actions with the dummy plug and with Toji, and how he handled dealing with Shinji and all that. And now it kind of looks like Gendo has been consistent, right? To the degree that he's quite shocked to learn that Yui and Gendo are in a relationship. Now, let's not blow past the fact that Fyosuke and Yui are out on a hiking trip together. Very social call, right? From the guy who apparently doesn't do social calls, right? Yeah, it's weird to see Gendo without his glasses. I agree. But he finds this... Yeah, he cannot hide his surprise when he hears that. It's very difficult. And she reveals that he has a kind of sweet side, a side that no one else sees. And maybe that's true. We never get a chance to see what they're like with no one else around. You know? It's one of those interesting choices they make here to let us see this entirely through Fyosuke. But because of his initial impression of Gendo, he is willing to believe some of these rumors. That Gendo, what Gendo really wanted from Yui was to gain access to her talents, and through her to the group she was associated with, Zila. And he's definitely, I think, more willing to believe that about him because of how unpleasant his first interaction has been with him and the unpleasant reputation Gendo already has, but also I think in contrast to how he feels about Yui and how he likes Yui enough to now hang out with her socially, which we know is a departure for him. Just from that little bit earlier, we know that this is. How are we supposed to take his being in jail? Is he a student agitator? I think certainly it characterizes him from the beginning as someone who bucks authority. who has very little um, respect for it, and we only have his side of things, that he was jumped, but that he couldn't talk his way out of it. Um, but he didn't seem that put out. He didn't seem that wronged, right? He's just kind of like nothing about what happened to Gendo seemed in being arrested seems to have surprised Gendo. Yeah, I think it's just us to let him know from the get-go that he is not someone highly principled, and especially how they set up Fyotsky to be the one who is highly principled. Because the next thing we kind of see when he gets involved with, oh, well, okay, sorry, I'm getting kind of ahead of myself. What happens is we discover the second impact happens, and Arca, we don't need to go all that. What I think it's interesting is to find out now that Fyotsky was not part of things then, that he is completely, that he came later, and which is, we wouldn't have expected, I don't think, based on how involved we've seen him to this point. And so the question that it's asking us to think at this point is, how did he get from here to there? Well, where did this Fyotsky, who seems to be wary of Gendo, wary of Zila, and so it doesn't answer us right away. Instead, it gives us this nice little bit of world building where talk about how the post-impact world, it can't even describe 2001. It was just hell, which is great. It lets our imagination take over, which is going to be a lot better than anything they can show us. And then it skips toward to this 2002. We get to see the world rebuilding. And it's been summer for a year, and you see the water level really high, and people building kind of ad hoc piers and boats and the cranes and stuff in the distance. They're trying to rebuild something, but it's almost like the whole world has turned into a series of outposts or refugee camps, essentially. It's a great, like, I don't know. You just see you see his little hospital with a little red cross on it. In this little bit, you see how far back civilization's been knocked, right? Anyway, leaving that interesting bit of, I just thought it was it's such a fast way to let us get a peek inside what was happening without derailing the whole plot, and certainly in contrast to the kind of carefree, collegiate thing that Fyotsky had going on, where a rowdy student like Gendo is the worst thing going on, right? But these people find him, and they want him to come on the trip, and we'll just skip ahead to the part where he actually meets Gendo, and he didn't realize that he was alive. All right, so it's not like he's been keeping up. But both he and us in the audience are updated on they got married, they had a child, he took Ikari's name, which, that could be another, depending on, if they already have some kind of family name, if he has some kind of prominence, then you could see, assuming that's true, especially since he had connections to Zila, which seems like something a little college student wouldn't just have, right? Maybe that's a family connection. Now Ikari, now Gendo taking the Ikari name tells us something else about him, if that's true, that he is pretty mercenary, that he will excise that kind of connection to his own family for the advantage that having the Ikari name might grant him, right? But leaving that aside, and his little detail of, I just happened to leave Antarctica the day before second impact. Gosh, I should buy a lottery ticket. So lucky. Yeah, so you're talking about how we never see Gendo from inside Gendo's mind. Yeah, very deliberate. Like it's very having everyone come to their own conclusion about it. And we don't see ever, like I mentioned, we don't see inside Yui's mind. We don't see what she means about how he has this sweet side. We never get to see it. Yeah, okay. It is true that it could be that it's a commentary on how close he is to Yui, that he would take her name instead. But what we get to see of Gendo can lead us in the opposite direction, right? That's the because it's surprising. I mean, Fyosuke's not his surprise that he's done that, and certainly as we're seeing from his viewpoint, I don't think his assumption would be, "Wow, he must really like Yui," right? Um, anyway, one of the things here that's worth mentioning is this commentary on how he's principled, Gendo justifying the way Zila does business, and Fyosuke realizing that he is there, he's not there as anything but a cover for legitimacy. That it is exactly his principled reputation that has brought him there. That he's like a smokescreen for whatever actually is going on. Which is kind of it's interesting to have Fyosuke characterized now as the straight shooter, right? Compared to Gendo, considering how connected at the hip we've seen them to this point. So again, we just wonder, why would this principled Fyosuke get involved in NeRV like we know he does? Little things, we don't have to go totally through them because again, we're trying to. Fyosuke's not the only person whose memory we jump into, right? And although it's brief, we get to jump into Misato, and she is also trapped in or being held in a dark room, and that has a different set of memories for her. And in this case, their two memories actually overlap because she remembers being back in the facility where she didn't talk for several years, where he is there seeing her and meeting her. So we now know that he remembers that Misato, which is kind of interesting. But I'm just skipping ahead just to point it out. Sorry. Oh, sorry. Definitely. We don't see the gap between that Misato and this Misato, right? The girl who didn't speak for 2 years and now is trying to make up for lost time. But other than just letting us wonder what happened, I think it shows us, and later with Ritsuko too, which is these are Ritsuko's memories when we get to them, is how much the past is chasing these characters we haven't seen as much into. Misato we have, but she's only that brief bit. It's really seeing into like Ritsuko's past and a little bit of Gendo's past, but not from his point of view, right? So let me skip back. I went too far. So we just have a few things. Yeah, just I wanted to build more off that legitimacy thing. We get this detail that the second impact caused the total eradication of all life, right down to microorganisms. So it wasn't just some gigantic explosion, okay? Like that, something different happened here. Sorry, I forgot I have to do that when I jump too far. As well as learning that there is this vast subterranean chamber, right? And that gets referenced later on. What's interesting to me is he learns these details. We're seeing it. We're learning these things from his point of view. But then the official report is completely different. It completely does not match what he saw down there, and so he knows it's a cover-up, right? And so the way he actually gets involved with all this is to out them that he is the principal guy, and despite what it may cost him, he wants to find out the truth, and even says even if that will lead him to Yui, even if that will spoil his impression of her. And you can see when they meet again for the first time, um, you can see that he's cool toward her in this moment, right? She's happy to see him. It's been a minute, but he carries on. He's got business with Gendo. It's very deliberate to show how he is cool towards her. And so we know that that he did not um, he did not just want to get a part of this, right? That he actually is joining from a place of some kind of moral high ground, at least to his mind, right? Um, as opposed to whatever is going on with Zila and this pragmatism, him talking about you need to be ruthless to survive in this environment. He's coming from the completely other end, so we're still wondering what in the world must have happened for him to agree. Um, anyway, so that becomes what is answered in the middle here before we switch perspectives is he is here to hold some people accountable, right? He is here to shine light into the dark places as he sees it. And Gendo doesn't argue with him. Gendo's whole tactic here is just to show him to what they're working on, that he is counting on Fyosuke's pursuit of truth and what he believes, and I think this ties into that conversation we were hearing over the security footage at the beginning, right? Um, um, the Gendo is confident that when he sees what's going on down here, he'll keep the secret, right? And that's quite a leap to a guy he knows is principled. But I think that goes back to that dogma conversation, and the scientists are not actually noble, that they are doing it for their own joy of discovery, that it's self-satisfaction, right? Um, so, sorry, I'm trying to keep up with the y'all are saying as well. So, anyway, there's this reference to a subterranean structure that is left by someone who is not us, and it's in a perfect sphere. And we learn that it's the match to the one referenced earlier in Antarctica, which they don't explore that much further at this point, but you know, pointing it out twice definitely draws our attention to it, and the only other we know of at this point is the angels, right? So now we really wonder. Now, especially the Tokyo 3 and the Geofront don't seem quite so random anymore. Like, why is Nerve's headquarters in this rebuilt Tokyo in Japan, of all places? And this seems to be the answer, right? We don't know what it means yet, but it seems to be the answer. Anyway, obviously Gendo want to show him that, but when he brings him in and introduces him to Naoko, who he wow, it's already gone. Introduces him to Naoko. You can see Gendo's satisfaction here. Like, he's pretty sure this is going to work, right? And the surprise and recognition tells us they have a history, that this is another person that Fyosuke has respect for. And so whatever it is they're going to show him, Gendo calculates. He knows that it's going to make an impression here.
and her she's got a logical reason to be here as well, since she works on biological computing. I think is how she yeah biological computers, a place that's doing all kinds of crazy, maybe ethics free biological experimentation is definitely a good spot for her. Um, this was again, you can just see from his reaction there that this was very calculated on Gendo's part. He's really sure that this is going to work. And what they show him, of course, is the beginning of the Ava project, and what I guess is either Unit Zero or what will become Unit Zero eventually, right? Um, and oh yeah, it's just Gahiran thing gets referred to throughout there. That's just the research organization before it becomes the Nerve military organization, which I guess could be its own commentary, right? Um, that science so easily converts into a tool for warfare. But they introduce that this is the Ava and where it gets its name from. That was created from Adam. So that is, if you were not familiar with the creation of Eve story, is that Adam was created and he was alone, and God created a companion for him, woman, from his rib. So it was actually created from him, not created from the same stuff. So anyway, pretty well known story. So I know I'm probably telling the obvious. The other thing that's kind of interesting is they call this the Adam Rebirth Project, which is like really on the nose about what they're after, right? Um, and Fiosuke will again this will be another reference to the Avas or an Adam, that the prototype of a god, this assigning this divine and superhuman uh, label to what these things are. And anyway, the offer is made. Will you join me in forging a new history for mankind? And we don't hear what he says. We don't hear any stipulations, but we know that he does, right? We know he accepts, and whatever else came from that. Now, he doesn't suddenly seem like a dramatically different person, but from here we diverge. We go back to the present. Ritsuko, someone mentioned something about Misato, and that takes her down memory lane. We kind of went over this already, but one of the things that's happening throughout this is, even though we are in Ritsuko's memory here, we very frequently see things from Naoko's point of view, who is not actually alive in the present for us to see her memory. And but how this is narrated is as a series of letters between mother and daughter, right? And we see that Misato is able to close the gap with Ritsuko, which we've known in the present's a problem, but apparently it was a problem even then. And by having her and her mother correspond through letters, it's further reinforced that there is this impersonal distance, right? This impersonal distance between her and everyone else. And she seems to have gotten it from her mother and her mother even, I don't have it marked, but her mother even apologizes that she's only a mother when it's convenient, right? Oh man. And so the impersonal, delayed, almost third person way they know each other is communicated to us in the way they exchange letters here, and how she, I don't know, it just reinforces that these are people who have a distance between them and other people, right? Um, so again, we don't find out why Misato suddenly became this person, and they become friends. I think partially just because for lack of options for Ritsuko, right? Um, anyway, let me speed up my my notes here. It definitely kind of foreshadows, not at this point foreshadowing, but it would have foreshadowed how why Misato has an easier time than everyone else getting to Shinji at first, right? Um, so anyway, the other thing I kind of wanted to mention, because I think it's kind of interesting, is we go back into Fyosuke's memory, and there's this little scene by the waters, this growing tree, and little Shinji. And what she's talking about here is the third impact, okay? That it's supposed to happen in 10 years, like it's prophesized to happen. And what she says, if I can get to it, is that Gehirn, which will eventually be Nerve, and Zila exist to prevent it, okay? And again, here's Fyosuke distancing himself. So we know even though that he's working with them now, he still is that same principled, here's the things I believe in, right? But what I guess is interesting to note here is at this point, at least as far as what Yui is saying, is that Zila exists to stop third impact. That is what they exist for. That is what Nerve is supposed to exist for. That's the goal they all have. And so now you can kind of see how, okay, maybe this is how Fyosuke was agreeable to this, since he's obviously putting himself different, or separating himself from Zila, aligning himself with Yui instead. And there's some things she refers to that are just cryptic. But what I kind of want to call attention to is the use of the point of view, the camera point of view. It talks about how he talks about how he's kind of explaining, they're continuing their thoughts, but as he turns around and looks, he kind of trails off. And we could see him looking and watching, and just a little bit, I don't know. Am I wrong that these are kind of lingering gazes and kind of maybe imply some kind of some feeling on the part of Fyosuke beyond student mentor? I don't know. It seems we were obviously the cut. We're supposed to realize that we're seeing things from his point of view, and he kind of interrupts what he's saying. Anyway, it's not important. We have to go through all this. I just think it's kind of, he'll do it again here when he turns around, where he seems to be zeroing in on Yui. I don't know. Is that my imagination? I mean, I think it's, yeah. I mean, yeah, he's into her, but I think I'll try and get to the other scene here. Sorry. There's this. I don't know. He's very uncomfortable with the. Yeah, I mean, that's what I think. I think he is. That this is one of, it's not the only example in this episode of someone who seems to be pining for someone who is with someone else, right? And yeah, I mean, it's certainly, well, I mean, I think Gendo could be off-putting, regardless of how you feel about Yui. But it definitely, they definitely seem to have opposite personalities. But yeah, exactly. I think there's definitely hints up to now you could read into it, but with this scene where he kind of lingers over her and the camera makes sure we know that he is, that it's his point of view we're seeing, I think it's being made a little more plain. So, and yeah, like I pointed out, they go on the hike, he's being social, and before he apparently wasn't being social enough that other people commented on it. So he's definitely into her, right? But he's not the only example of this, because as we skip a little bit forward in time, to the experiment they were just referring to. We have this nice little bit where Shinji's there, and Naoka is obviously so uncomfortable with children, right? Like, that's another immediate characterization of her. But we find out Yui has brought him in to see this experiment, and she says it's because she wants him to see he has a bright future ahead of him, okay? And Naoko will tell us that those were her last words, that he's waving at Mom, but that's it. And she will admit, she'll narrate this out, but she'll admit she was glad of it. And we'll see later why, right? But, we mentioned it before, but now, of course, we know for sure. Shinji watched this happen. He saw whatever happened to his mother. And we don't get to see it either, right? It's off screen for us too. But we now know from his memory before, where he had actually seen Unit 1 before, and now we know he was there to watch whatever this experiment was, that he witnessed this. That this is something deep in his subconscious, but it comes up at times, that he did see her die. So, anyway. So we find out that our Gendo Yui pair doesn't just have, Fyosuke pining for one half. We've got Naoka pining for the other half. Back to that same desolate graveyard. One thing she does say in here is that, and she's even saying it to Ritsuko, that Gendo was a changed man after that day. And though they don't say this, my interpretation too is that Fyosuke's a changed person after this from now on as well. I think it impacts both of them. I skipped past it, but someone was saying the same thing, that this might have been a thing that made Fyosuke and Gendo pull them closer, right? And the next thing the Gendo seems to do in his grief, in his mourning, and then staying away from a week, is that he proposes the path to attain godhood, the human instrumentality project. So that comes directly from Yui's death. All right, I mean, that's like the key thing to take from this. And we again have like the cross iconography there in the background, and it kind of impaling into him. Anyway, Naoka gets her wish, sort of, because, she and Gendo will carry on, and Ritsuko will discover it. Though that's only, that's more, nothing seems to come of it. It's just something we get to see, and we know that she gets to see. And then, suddenly Ray, baby Ray. Gendo introduces her as he's looking after a friend's daughter, but Naoka will immediately jump to that she reminds her of someone, and the person she reminds her of is Yui. Immediately. So from the get-go, we already knew, because of the earlier Shinji scene, that Naoka is not good with kids, but then to further be reminded of Yui, it just sets up what happens, right? She immediately starts digging, trying to find out more about Ray, and of course there's nothing to it. She is right to be suspicious, of course. Alright, well, I didn't have my notes from this, but we basically have Ritsuko talking about men and women are hard to figure out. They're actually talking about Kaji and Misato having broken up here. But what she's saying out loud, too, I think, is that the same goes for her mother and Gendo. And yeah, exactly. At first, Naoko is like, I thought you had a boy. Like, she hasn't even paid enough attention to to realize that and say, oh, maybe I was wrong. Maybe it was a daughter all along. But this little bit that Risco's saying is pretty key, that it is hard to figure out men and women, right? And that is why kind of what happens. Because when Ray comes in antagonizing her, which, wow, spicy Ray. What really sets her over the edge is not being, smack talk from a little kid. It is when she reveals that those are all things that Gendo says. And so it immediately strikes to the heart of her insecurity, right? And hearing that's bad enough. Hearing the idea that she's replaceable, that she isn't getting what she wants, that's bad enough. But feeling like it's coming from Yui, right? Like that little image there where one fades into the other. And then imagining that while she is all there for Gendo, Gendo is somewhere else. Yeah, it's complicated between men and women, and she shuts up the things that Ray is saying in a very effective but very terrible way. And then she makes this little comment that even if you die, there will be another to take your place, just like me, basically. And so I think part of it is her strangling her own situation, her own feeling replaceable in this moment too. But it's definitely like angry at that strikes right at her insecurities with her and Gendo, and to hear it from Yui, who she was so jealous of and secretly glad died, and to be a child. I don't know, it just all comes, obviously it's a very extreme thing to child saying some things about you and you choke it to death. But I think it's because it's a confluence of all those pressures at once. And yeah, now the question is this what Gendo is actually saying in the comfort of wherever it is he and Ray will be hanging out? Or is this Ray being antagonistic on purpose? I think it's a thing that's not spelled out for us, probably on purpose. But Naoko is not at least a complete psychopath, and I think it's heavily implied that she throws herself over the edge here. But that also is not spelled out. And I think it's widely kind of accepted that this is a suicide, but you don't know. It doesn't spell it out for us. Yeah, at least both those things up in the air. Did baby Ray antagonize her on purpose? Did she kill herself out of guilt? I mean, I think it's pretty heavy implied to cut between the two scenes like that. But it is only implied. I might as well point that out. Anyway, we are running over, so let me just get to the last couple things. We see that Kaji was not actually kidnapping Fyosuke, but rescuing him. And he'll later make a comment about trying to endear himself to the right people. He's playing a dangerous game, essentially. Because he knows they're about to figure out that he's the one who snuck Adam to Gendo. And it appears that he is trying to, just like before when Misato warned him he's playing a dangerous game, he said that he was still useful to Gendo. But before we see what leads to that, they come to let Misato out of containment, and they simply say the issue's been resolved. And you can look at her; she knows to be worried about that, and she asks about him, and they don't have anything to say. And then, yeah, I mean, she fears the worst, and her instincts are good on this front, because the thing we see is that whoever it was he was meeting, again, one more thing we don't get to see, is he was not immediately on guard with whoever it was, right? He was not immediately threatened. Um, and then there's a gunshot, and again, we don't see it. We don't see the body. It all happens off stage. But again, the series is not big on giving definitive answers to questions, and a lot of the deaths and motivations in this one episode are follow that pattern. So, anyway, as much as this episode sprinted basically through all of these past. I'm sorry, I got a notification that the channel is qualified to apply for affiliate. Yay. All of these, just absolutely running through these past, running into multiple people's point of view, filling in all this information. We just learn so much so fast. When we get to this final scene, I've gone beyond the beginning of it. It slows way down. Like there's this long where Shinji is isolated in the one room with his music, and she's isolated in the other room, just trapped with worry. I mean, I'm playing this real time for you. This is a very, very slow scene compared to everything else. And then realizing she's got the message. But even when she goes to, thank you. Yeah, sorry. Okay. I didn't know what was popping up, the affiliate warning. I'm like, what's going? Right. And yeah, they make us feel this as well as they can, because they, after such a sprint of an episode, it slows so far down, and the hesitation of reaching for the message and worried about what it is. We get to see her. I don't know. I mean, I don't need to go through it all, but part of the tragedy of it is the finality of what he's saying, and the little things he asks to, I've been growing flowers. Please water them. Please keep this thing I made living on. Right? Don't let this little part of me die out. And it's also giving her an activity, right? It's giving her something of his to nurture should she want. Yeah, I mean, it's very, in an episode where they're strapped for time for all the things they've got to try to cover, to slow down, to let us hear the entire message. And she knows, hearing him say that, she also knows that he knew that this was probably it. Yeah, it's a terrible day for Rain. But for the umpteenth time, there's an opportunity between two people to close the gap between them, to become closer, right? And as she cries and can't keep her composure, and she really goes to full on ugly crying here, it's enough to rouse Shinji, and he comes in there and peeks in, and he's not equal to it, right? In fact, to the degree that he doesn't just walk away awkwardly, but goes and covers his head. Even hearing her grief secondhand is painful from him. He hides from it. I mean, he will retreat into the excuse that he's just a child. There was nothing he could do, nothing he could say. But I mean, even little kids know to like come and comfort someone who's crying or upset. Um, this is a really uh, this is a really this is an indictment of Shinji, honestly. Yeah, I mean, even a poor effort to console her would be human, right? Would be effective in a small way, like not great, but uh, anyway. Here's a whole. So this episode has a lot of things in parallel. You have lots of relationships that are forbidden. You have one half of a pair dying. Um, whether it's where it's a good pair, whether it's a what appears to at least be a wholesome relationship between Gendo and Yui versus the relationship between Gendo and Naoko. Um, yeah, yeah. Now I understand like this being more than Shinji knows how to handle. Um, there's no gesture at all, And more to the point, rather than just that's one thing. Going in the other room, closing off his ears so he doesn't have to listen to her cry, making excuses in his mind why it's okay that this is what he's doing. Um, I mean, it says a lot about Shinji. I mean, it's his intimacy issues are they haven't gotten that much. They haven't gotten enough better. They haven't gotten enough better. They haven't gotten better to the degree that he could do something that's not simple. I know this is not simple, but it's yeah, it's in character. It's not like a sudden reversal. It's more like we unfortunately see that he has not made the progress that we would have hoped for him, given all these opportunities to progress as a person who is not so afraid of intimacy, right? Um, yeah, that's a good point. That it's like losing her dad again a bit since she saw her dad in Kaji. Um, yeah, I mean, even yes, like you're saying, he doesn't have to. He doesn't have to be go in there and hug her and hold her and reassure her that everything's going to be all right. But any gesture would have been nice, and any gesture would have. Um, I don't know. It's not just the absence of gesture; it's the way he hides from it, as though he knows that he should do something. Right? He's giving excuses for not doing anything, which to me says he knows he's supposed to in this situation. This is not ignorance. This is his own fear of pain, fear of intimacy, right? So, anyway, that is an episode where a lot happens, and I wrote out everything I want to say ahead of time because I thought there's no way I'll get through it otherwise. Um, but y'all are having a discussion here about here. Let me swap over to that. Talking about the theory that it's actually Misato who shoots him. Well, that would imply that he was expecting Misato because he's expecting whoever it is that shows up in that scene. Yeah, here's the thing, and I don't mean for us to like be crapping on Shinji for this. Um, yeah, Shinji does not come off smelling like roses from this. At the same time, like people are saying, it's not inconsistent with this character either. Um, it sets up a moment where we hope he would do something different, and he didn't. It's so yeah. So we understand it. It's not unbelievable. It doesn't strain at our credibility, but it's not. We wish something else had happened. We hate that that's how it happened, right? Yeah, I mean, I think it's natural to feel some disappointment in Shinji at this point, from the point of view of the audience. Um, but yeah, but we're still disappointed. Exactly. It's it's a it's a disappointment. It's just a disappointment that we are unfortunately unsurprised by. Um, yeah. Anyway, I think it's time to take a little break here before we go into the next episode. Um, didn't even say everything I wanted to say. That's okay. Do not have as good a notes for next episode, so we'll try to make it fast. Yeah. So where's Asuka? Yeah, 22 is also longer than normal. So that's gonna be a minute. So we're gonna take a very short break. Then we'll come back and do 22. All right. So this will, you'll see, I'm not nearly as prepared for 22. So, all right. Let me set us up a little graphic, and I'll be back. Alrighty. Hope y'all enjoyed my opportunity to put the elevator scene to double duty. Trying to catch up on what y'all were talking about. Yes, tomorrow will be 25 and 26 in the morning, and then just the recap that afternoon. Similar schedule to today. The recap movie, as implied in the title, will be mostly old material, and so it's not like we're going to go through it super thoroughly. Look at a few things that might be a little different, but it's also mostly going to be a chance to look back at the entire original run and see if there are any questions that we. A chance to see if there are catch anyone up on any questions they still have about that original run. That might mean me too, for sure. Before we do End of Evangelion on Sunday. So it's kind of an attempt to get us all on the same page, basically. Me especially. But yeah, that'll be most of the thing. There's a much bigger gap tomorrow. There's always a gap. I heard y'all talk about it here. I put a gap between the double broadcast that gives you enough time to watch the second half each time. And so it's an hour and a half today, assuming we can make good time here. I'll be skipping around today. I'm sorry. I'm not as prepared for this one. Hour and a half today will be plenty of time to watch those two and, get a bite to eat or something like that. And then tomorrow the gap will be closer to 2.5 hours. So if you really wanted to, you could watch it then. All right. And then on Sunday, there's just the one. We're just going to talk about the end of Evangelion until my throat gives up the ghost, we call it. All right? So, yes, so we're not talking about Rebuild. Rebuild's a whole different thing. It's not on Netflix. That story is not complete either. So, yeah, whether the Netflix edition is different than some other editions, I'm not totally. As far as the recap movie goes, it has a different name, and I understand that yeah, so we'll be going through what's actually on Netflix, but I understand that it's going to be slightly different than the original Death and Rebirth. But I have no idea how. I'll sit down and try to parse that as well. Probably minor things, you know. Um, some of these episodes, I'll talk about this earlier, that some of these episodes are actually longer than in the original run because they go over the race. So some of these are kind of the director's cut. But I actually don't remember which scenes are part of that, which are not. So that's why I've been using Netflix as our text. All right, that's our official source for this, so that we're not on a whole bunch of different pages. Anyway, let's get to episode 23 and get to it. Just like the previous episode, we again have a scene that takes place before the intro. And once again, it is a scene that happens before our series began. This is obviously on the carrier. They're on their way to delivering. This is what happens right before episode 8, basically. And it's Asuka and Kaji thinking about what's happening, or thinking about the next day. And I think it's interesting to see that we're going to be all in Asuka's head this time, but the first memory they reach for is one with Kaji, which connects him back to the end of last episode. But also, does Asuka know, right? I know, we've gone back in time. Kaji's alive again. Just to twist the knife a little bit further, right? But what is part of this conversation they're having is she feels the need to explain who Misato is, which means not only that Kaji never indicated they used to be a thing, we could have guessed that from the way he surprised them, but it means she didn't know they knew each other at all. Furthermore, the way he's kind of lost in thought here with her bringing up Misato, suggests to me that that's what he's thinking about, that he knows they're going to be meeting again the next day. So here we are right before Kaji actually enters our story, and we see him kind of lost in thought. And so here again is a moment where a character is trying to close the gap between themselves and another character, and they can't. And in this situation, she can't close the gap the way she seems to want to, but I think he is also somewhere else, right? He is also distant. He's also thinking about somebody else, right? And so quite apart from the whole adult-child thing, he is mentally and emotionally somewhere else. And yeah, like you say, it says Kaji didn't say a lot about himself, or that part of his life with Misato in the past is something he doesn't talk about. She obviously knows him enough to crush on him the way she does. But anyway, let me cue up what I actually want to talk about here. Yeah. So Asuka's what Asuka, she's like, let me tell you about Misato. I don't like Misato. She's always putting up a front. Only if you think about the irony. Or rather, the lack of self-awareness, right? I find it pretty interesting that is her take on her. That she actually sees right through to the fact that Misato puts up a front. And recognize that about her, but doesn't seem to know that about herself. Now, again, Kaji's kind of stonewalling her here, and I think he's probably thinking about Misato. I think we don't know, but it seemed pretty reasonable considering the conversation, considering the impending meeting, and but Asuka continues to try to get his attention. We're going to be apart from each other, and Kaji's like, oh, I'm sure there'll be new guys there. There'll be lots of new boyfriends for you, Asuka. I don't know. If pilots don't comprehend irony. I think it is funny how often you see someone criticize someone else for a problem they themselves possess. And that's actually, that jives with the real world. You know, you often most hate in others a quality you yourself possess, the way it reminds you of the thing you don't like about yourself. So I think that's a very realistic way they have painted these characters, but it just underscores that these people have problems. Yeah, exactly. And it takes one to know one. Yeah, I mean, you recognize it because you've experienced with it, and since you hate it about yourself, you hate any reminder of it, hate any instance of it. Anyway, the whole conversation where he's trying to get her to, don't think about me, there's going to be these new boys and all that, and even mentions that the third child is a boy, and she's just like, the only person I like is you, right? And he again I don't know, he feel like he handles this pretty well, honestly. Like, this is she's put him in a bad place here. But she is unfortunately honest here, I guess. That, if you asked, whatever you do, out loud, of course he's not wrong. She's just a kid, but that's not the thing her ego needs to hear at this point, right? That she, yeah, I mean, she is desperate for this connection, right? But one of the things we find out this time, and something I point out repeatedly, so I'm glad we finally got to the point where it's easier to talk about. We've made note over and over again of how often she thinks about her sexual development, her femininity, as she's kind of obsessed with that projection to other people. And we see this little bit of hers where she is talking about that she is in fact grown up enough. And the way she proves it is to open up her shirt, show him her cleavage. I am an adult, right? And it means that for Asuka, outside of this particular desperate moment, for Asuka, her sexuality, her development into someone who looks like a woman, to her is the same. And so, being an adult to her means looking like this, and having, being girl, being a young woman. That means I'm an adult, right? And so her sense of self as an adult comes from this sexuality, and so she needs some reaction to it. She needs some validation to it. And, didn't cut to the wrong thing here. Sorry. I wasn't trying to give you 10 minutes of cleavage shot there. Just Stream Deck failed me. It's something we've taken note of. It's something I've pointed out over and over again, how much she defaults to thinking that someone's after her sexuality, or is looking at her, or would peek in on her changing and all this. And here we have it very plain that she is relating the way I look means I'm an adult. But the important thing I guess we learned this time is why being an adult is so important to her. You're welcome. You could just screenshot it. You don't need me to do it. But of course, in that actual memory, we'll have a kind of a... Yeah, sorry. I was just not going to hold on cleavage shot forever. But saying that, making that claim triggers this kind of, epileptic seizure cavalcade of memories with the little doll, and then the follow-up thought, so please look at me, right? Um, so what it does, here's the doll, and this is me again because I'm not as prepared today. We're gonna not skip around. We are going to we'll talk about it now because I don't have the clips or ready to fetch. But basically, her mother has went through some kind of contact experiment. That's another reference to a contact experiment, something we heard in the past. Um, Seems to have made her go crazy, and one of the results of that is not only that she eventually kills herself, although there seems to be some question about that, but this, that she seems to have mistaken her daughter for a doll and her doll for a daughter, right? She talks to the doll, she thinks it's her daughter, and Asuka, of course, is witnessing all that. I think it's kind of interesting. She's wearing little red hair decks at this point, right? And we find out that she, just like so many of our other parent figures, was a mother who was involved in her career rather than her role as mother, right? And so what being an adult for Asuka is being someone who couldn't be mistaken for a doll, right? Asuka's insistence on believing people look at her as a sexual being is about her being looked at as an adult. It's not just about the attention. It's not just about. We'll find out she has a little bit of a not bad relationship with her father necessarily, but it's obviously not. It has its own problems. But more importantly, for Asuka, being someone who looks like a woman means she is someone who doesn't look like a doll, right? She's not a doll. And so having someone find her attractive or think of her sexually and all that, not just anyone, as we found out, the boys sending love letters weren't good enough, but from someone whose attention she wants, validates her, yes, but it also connects back to this neurosis she has about her mother thinking of her as a thinking of her as a doll. And she'll do several things this time that indicate how much she yeah, sorry. I'm ahead of my notes, that's why I'm kind of stumbling apart. So like I mentioned, there's the kind of complication with her father. We don't meet him, as far as I know, right? But you can tell from that little clip there that whoever the doctor is taking care of her mother is involved with that father. And since she will later have a stepmother, right, that she has the conversation on the phone with, I guess we can make the leap that that's who that is. Yeah. And so, anyway, I just want to point out, I guess, that the whole doll thing, or rather the way this reveal about her mother and the trauma of that, part of the reason that Asuka thinks that everyone looks at her through the lens of her sexuality is partially because she's hoping they are. She's hoping that they see her as an adult, not a child, not a doll, not as someone helpless. So that opening scene with Kaji helps make that link more plain, that this makes me an adult, this makes me a woman, right? Yeah. Moral of the story, take care of your kids. So much of the Evangelion could have been avoided just with some better parenting, right? So let me just find our next little bit here I want to talk about. So obviously in the moment we have a problem with oh yeah, so that was, gosh, that's the thing. part of that same conversation that I skipped past is they're talking about how dolls are something that humans make in their own image, right? And then there's this kind of wondering if maybe we're God's dolls, maybe we're the dolls that God has made. And I think that is not a comparison that Asuka cares for at all. The dolls do not have autonomy, and so relating a human to a doll, that they are the playthings that they were made to do and act whatever, is again something that she rebels against, right? Anyway, her recent decline, her defeats, all that have added up, and that's why we are getting into things. And plus dolls, yeah. Dolls also are something kids play with, and she's further trying to separate herself from being a kid. Not being something that could be mistaken as a doll. And so we have kind of the background crisis here, that she is losing her ability to sync. And Ritsuko, in a very mercenary or not pragma way, decides to shift, and you can once again see Maya's commentary in her expression, how she feels about this turn. I tell you what, going back through this second time, I realized what a gem Maya is for reading the room. It's funny how just this background character who, I didn't even know her name for a minute. It's such a nice, human contrast to some of Ritsuko's decision. Anyway, additionally, another tech is, hey, I mean, someone puts it up here, Maya can be best girl, is another tech who shares with us a little information. That they suddenly have been ramping up construction, right? And this is the guy I mentioned before, that I pointed out. He made the bad joke about poking here, and now we see several times here where he will be coming through for Misato and doing things that are obviously putting him in at risk. And so you wonder if perhaps, I suggested at the time that he might be a little bit flirty. You have to wonder, especially, oops, let me fix the audio. You have to wonder, especially in context of all these other relationships we just went through, where there is a party pining for someone else in a relationship, if that doesn't apply to him too, that he might, I read it that he is doing some of this out of a personal connection to Misato and a desire, again, to grow closer. Something, and for him too, is interfering. So, hi, welcome. I hope ads are not keeping everyone out. So, just watching it. Oh, well, we're most of the way through, but it's been fun. Yeah, we're confused with the random character becoming her secret agent. Well, that's why I've tried to point out before, where he seemed to make the joke and then realize it fell flat. That I think he's been paying attention to Misato. I think this might be someone who is a little sweet on her, and which is why he is doing some of this. Spoilers are allowed up through these episodes. Yeah. Sorry, this is where we are. Thank you, though. But if you catch up, we're doing, the 25, 26 tomorrow, and the recap movie later that day, and then Sunday will be end of Evangelion. At that point, everyone should be caught up, and we'll talk about everything. So yeah, at this moment, we're just up to 22. So, yeah, so he's the same guy who makes the joke, and taking that into account with what he does here, I think, and especially last episode where we saw all the unrequited love, right? That thing. Yeah, great. Well, yeah, please show up. It'll be fun.
I think that's his motivation here. Like, why has he put himself out? And I think just the few moments we've seen him try to get closer to Misato and her not notice suggests that that is part of his motivation, right? But anyway, the information quite apart from his characterization, he shares this little information about suddenly we have all these other Evangelions. Suddenly we're ramping up our production. And that is apparently weird because they've actually been cannibalizing other ones that have been in production. And so all we find out is that it's unusual they're doing this, but is perhaps even more unusual that they are keeping it under wraps. So all of this at this moment is, all that's happening at this moment is telling us Zila's doing something else unexpected, and it has something to do with making a lot more Evas. But this is again something Misato didn't know, or he wouldn't need to go. Yeah, where is all the money coming from in this series? What is the cost of this? Some country somewhere, or several countries, are having a hard time. But again, since it's immaterial to the show, we don't get as much of it. Yeah, keep taxing, seems like awkward timing. Well, exactly. I mean, we over and over again we have that happen, right? He makes a joke at the bad time. He doesn't know, I'm sure, the situation with Kaji. Or he does know, and this is how he's trying to endear himself, which, that's a different read on him entirely, isn't it? Yeah, there's all these, like, budget talks and doubles, but there's never hard figures, you'll notice. You never actually get a standard for comparison. Yeah, no one seems to know where the money is coming from. The only actual clue we have was last time when Gendo was taking Fuyotsuki and showing him the Geofront for the first time. He makes a statement that this is where all the combined resources of humanity are going, which I think makes her, what I think would make the most sense is they've actually essentially had all the budget they need all the time, and there are all these hoops they have to jump from to give the illusion of propriety, and possibly different members of Zila each are contributing to this and don't want to be the one who has to contribute the lion's share. But the way Gendo said that suggested that no matter what happened, they were always going to have funding. So, yeah, if for something that's not actually doesn't actually impact the story, we do spend an awful lot of time bringing it up. But anyway. So you're saying that, that he's been chumming with her from the start. Yeah, I think so. I don't think this is nefarious on his part. I think she perhaps is turning to him more at this moment. But yeah, exactly. They didn't want to repair Zero, and now there's 7 new Evas. So I think rather than money, this is just a way of showing us that emphasizing that their priorities have suddenly shifted, and money is just a way to indicate that now they're feeling a little more serious. Now they're feeling a little more motivated to do whatever it is they're trying to do, right? Especially like kidnapping Fuyotsuki last time, right? So anyway, a couple of things just running through. In Asuka's distress, she tries to reach out to Kaji again, right? So just like we saw that connection at the very beginning of this in the flashback, she tries it again. She tries to give Kaji a call. But of course we know the why her calls are not getting through. And so this is another instance of her trying to make a connection, and it can't work this time, right? I mean, it absolutely can't. So, this is again going back to dramatic irony that we talked about before, right? We get to know things the characters don't and watch how they go about things. But in that moment where she is trying to reach out and make the connection that she can't,
she notices what looks like people making a connection in contrast, right? And so I think, I don't know what I just did. I think the contrast makes it worse, right? I think the deliberate thing that she keeps trying to make connections and seeing anyone else, just like seeing Shinji succeed when she doesn't, seeing them make a connection when she is failing to, it just twists the knife, right? It's just that much worse. Makes her feel that much more vulnerable. And so she starts to increase her dislike towards Shinji and towards Rei because of this. This one little bit of contrast. Obviously, it's been building for a minute. And like she says, and she even says it. Yeah, hang on. Yeah, I know I lost. And to the likes of you, the losing was bad enough, but as other characters will point out, it was the losing to Shinji that was so bad. And so they have the dinner later on. Misato talks about how it's the first time they've been together in ages, but you can cut the tension with a knife. So we saw a pretty amicable living situation for the three is now not. It's quite distant. All of the walls are back up. And, Asuka, we have a reversal of the situation with Toji now, where the phone rings and Asuka refuses to answer it because, it's just Kaji calling. You should get it. And, ouch for Misato. But Shinji, I think Shinji also realizing that's not on the cards, which is why he gets up to answer it. And so now Asuka, ouch. Again, it's like the advantage of dramatic irony. That scene, that little exchange means something different to us since we know something the characters don't. So, yeah, that won't happen. So the other thing that happens in this scene is more lack of self-introspection. Yeah, so I am sure my German viewers at the moment can weigh in on her performance here. But we have another moment of not quite self-aware Asuka, just like the one in the beginning, where she is criticizing Shinji for his politeness in answering the phone, and then he hands the phone to her. And it's her mother. We actually find out her stepmother. But the change, right? Where she switches into this super personable and, I'm sure y'all will weigh in on her, yeah, German. After criticizing him for being so polite, handed the phone of her stepmother, who she only has a superficial relationship with. She becomes the one who's incredibly polite and pure-free. I don't know what she's saying. It doesn't actually matter what she's saying, right? The point is that she's doing the very thing she was just hating on Shinji for, right? But more to the point, she can throw that switch, right? And Shinji, in his naivete, thinks that, wow, it's like when she's in speaks a different language, it's like she's a different person. Not realizing the falseness of the conversation, right? And when he says, "Oh, you seem to be getting along," she starts to explain that no, it's just superficial. Not even my real mother. And Asuka starts to explain the situation before realizing she's not supposed to be vulnerable. She's not supposed to be. She's supposed to be mad at Shinji. She's supposed to be withdrawn from Shinji. She's supposed to be angry at him for his success and his ability to draw close to Rei. Did he stand here the whole time? Yes. I mean, it's awkward. It's Shinji. We never find out that's actually his middle name. It's just he doesn't seem to understand, right? But what we get from that little exchange is that Asuka, having flipped that switch to be polite and then trying to explain things to Shinji, she forgets for a moment that she's supposed to be so upset at him. Which means, again, they could close this gap between them. It's an opportunity to make it right, or as right as it can be. For this moment, she rejects it, right? She keeps having a moment where she can not be so alone and isolated, and her pride gets in the way. Anyway, let us skip in. Yeah. So one thing I pointed out before, we talked about a different episode, was how this living arrangement came about because they just needed to live together to practice for the synchronized dance, right? So they needed to, wake and sleep and eat and do all these things with each other to get in sync. But after that, there's no reason she should have had to stay. They should have either moved Shinji out, maybe with Kaji, maybe with one of his classmates, or Asuka should have gotten her own place, or whatever, but they didn't do any of that. She didn't raise a fuss. She never brought it up. She was fine watching everything, right? But now, at this point, suddenly, not only does she, so suddenly that amicable living space, which should be her refuge, right? It should be where she can retreat from all this. Suddenly, the reminders of other people are unpleasant. The bath water, she doesn't want to use the same washing machine. She doesn't want to sit on the same toilet. She doesn't want to breathe the same air. I mean, she gets pretty, ridiculous about it. Now suddenly, all those reminders of intimacy with other people are unpleasant. They inspire hate in her. She, quite apart from just trashing the connections that become available, now finds the existing connections to be unclean or bothersome to her, right? Not important, but they use the same water to bathe. Yeah, that's traditionally like they use just one bath water. You don't get in the bath until you clean yourself. And so bath water is heated up and you go, I think oldest to youngest, generally, like a deference to elders. And so you were supposed to be relatively clean by the time you get in that bath water. But instead of heating up water for everybody, you clean yourself independently and just soak in the tub. So it might be better to think of it as more of a hot tub way to finish, rather than them all cleaning themselves in the same water. So, but yeah, there's definitely like a so there's KC Supersonic's talking about the connections there are reminders of her own failures, a reminder of her this situation. But she gets, as she's thinking about it, she gets increasingly, things lagging. She gets increasingly angry. She gets increasingly hateful. And she starts saying it. She hates them. She hates Rei the most. Mom and Dad. I mean, you see the escalation here, right? And the rage that comes out. And the bath, instead of being this refuge, this place of this calming retreat, right? Instead becomes this situation that is extremely unpleasant to her. So yeah. Anyway, let me see if I can find the other clips because I don't have markers for all of them. They do talk about, like I said, I mentioned earlier, so I might as well just show it. But that Asuka's confidence taking a hit. The defeat is bad, but losing to Shinji seems even worse. And there is Misato wondering if it's all going to work out. And then Misato, to further trash a connection she has, when she doesn't like what Ritsuko says, that she's not going to take crap from a lady who drowns her loneliness with cats. So, at the same moment that the kids are failing to connect to one another, and their connections that do exist are being strained, the adults are no better, you know? We again have this adult-child thing. Now, Misato will later try to give Asuka an out when she's continuing to slip in her performance and says, she's on her period and all this, and she's like, that shouldn't matter. But what we see, we do get a little moment behind the scenes where Asuka is dealing with that, and she complains about having to deal with this because she's a girl, even though she never wants kids, right? It's the wrong thing. What I find interesting about that, I guess, is becoming a woman and sexual maturity was one of the things she clings to as an identity, right? I'm an adult, look at me, and all this. But it's a burden to her also at the same time that she doesn't want to be a kid. She doesn't care if she's fertile. She doesn't care about the why she has to go through this. Just the part where she looks like a woman, not like a doll, not like a kid. So here's this tension of she's not even going to she doesn't even want the motherhood part out of it. Now, considering her relationship with her mother and the mother issues, it's not really surprising, right? But it means that for how much her sexual maturity and sexuality seems to matter to her, that it lies side by side with this unpleasantness and this reminder that she's capable of being a mother as much as she doesn't want to be, right? So, anyway, we got the elevator scene, the infamous, very long cut. This is another instance, I think, where the length of time where nothing seems to happen works, right? It works as it's so long compared to, and it's not hilarious. I mean, it's like 45 seconds, right? Yeah. She wants to be an adult, but wants to skip the part where she has to grow up. Yeah, I agree. Well, anyway, the reason this, again, comically long elevator scene works is the discomfort it invokes in the audience. This is so long to go without a cut or a line or anything that we... Is my player stuck? She blinks once in there and coughs once, and that's the only clue we have that we're not just watching a still image. And so it invokes in the audience the same awkwardness that the characters feel, right? I mean, yeah, I think that this sticks out in people's mind means successful scene, good use of this long scene, right? Because the way we feel mirrors the way the characters feels. Now, the delightful meta irony, I guess, of this, no, that's probably not the right term, but is in a show where characters so often struggle to show empathy, to close that empathetic distance, there are so many instances where they make the audience feel the same as the characters. They make us have this opportunity to be empathetic to the characters. It's like emphasizing that, gosh, we in the audience can manage this. What is wrong with you? Um, and so the fact the show does that so repeatedly and the characters fail at it so repeatedly is such an interesting contrast. It's such an interesting, yeah, I don't know. It's just, I don't know. It's actually surprised me that people get fixate on the scene so much because I'm like, I felt uncomfortable. Wasn't that the goal? And the victory, right? Um, Now, one of the things revealed at the end of the scene, because we're not going to watch the whole thing, um, is Rey does in fact finally pipe up and try to tell Asuka that she needs to open her heart to her Ava. And she's immediately bristles at the idea that she's closing herself off, that she has mental walls. Um, Again, Asuka, but with the lack of self-awareness, right? Um, but more that Rey is saying that the Evangelions have a heart, that you must know that you need to connect to them. But what we're getting essentially is a parallel between her failure to connect to the Evangelion and her failure to connect to other people. That as more as she shuts herself off from everyone else, the further she gets from a usable sync rate, the less vulnerable she's making herself to others seems to affect the way she pilots. And Rey here is saying that the Avas have a heart, that you have to connect to them. You have to connect to them just as surely as you have to connect to someone else. I think it's telling that Asuka immediately bristles about it and are saying I've put up mental walls. Like she knows she's talking about other people. But Asuka is not in the mood for that kind of thing. She despairs. No frame by frame analysis of the elevator scene. We can study the way Asuka sniffs, read into that. The way she was willing to show this biological imperfection in front of Rey means that she's willing to show weakness to her and is inviting Rey to give an opportunity to close the. Yeah, we're not going to do that. And yeah, like you're saying, Asuka's got these walls, but Rey even. Yes, Asuka has these walls, but Asuka even realizes that Rey reaching across is unusual. If you start a conversation with me, hell must have frozen over. So in this situation, even Rey is interested in closing this empathetic gap. It's just interested in reaching out, right? But Asuka's too far in, and can't take it at what it is, and she wants to externalize it. You're happy I'm defeated. Wants to externalize it at Shinji. For someone who seems to know that she hates herself because she's articulated it, she still retreats to putting the blame outward, right? But the thing now, Rey takes all this. Rey takes the whole thing until she accuses her of being a clockwork doll. Now, at this point, now we know that accusing someone of being a doll has a little extra significance coming from Asuka. And that is actually the one thing that Rey will respond to in her little rant. She'll interrupt to say that I'm not a doll. And then Asuka is, of course, mad that she is. And she says a doll is one that takes orders, who simply does whatever. And so at this point, the violence really does run over. So now that puppet-like action and the way she doesn't react to her provocation, we now realize part of why Asuka's kind of hated Rey from the beginning, right? It all goes back to this trauma in her past about her mother and the dolls and all that. And so she's never felt competitive with Rey, right?
she's never felt like Rei was the one she had to beat. It's just that she seems like an automaton, and that and she equates just obeying orders to being doll-like. So now, later, when Asuka will buck orders, I think that's another thing that she subconsciously separates herself from being a doll by intentionally not following every order, by intentionally having conflict with authority. We have desync. Yeah, sometimes individual streams will desync too, on top of everything else that can go wrong, right? So anyway, from here I do not have enough markers to jump around. So this is the part where I'm going to struggle to finish everything else I wanted to say. Yeah, so here's just the one thing. Just as Asuka was externalizing all the blame just there in the elevator, she will now go one step further to talk to her Ava, right? And even blaming it for some of their loss, right? Even like you lost like that. And then equates it to a doll, right? Which we know, is quite the stinging thing for her. But the fact that Asuka is talking to it suggests that she doesn't think of it that way, right? So it's just like what Rei said in the elevator. I think deep down, it has a heart. That, yeah, she actually listened to Rei. And Asuka thinks the heart gets in the way. What's a need with a heart? What's a weapon need with a heart? It just gets in the way. What do these Ava pilots need with a heart? They just get in the way, right? I mean, they are just as much a weapon as the Avas. And so, I think she just encapsulated our whole series in that one statement. What's a weapon need with a heart? It just gets in the way. Yeah. Of course, even Asuka eventually will realize, as the thing continues to stare at her impassively. Looks very much like a crab there, doesn't it? I can't shake the crab-like impression I get from it. Even Asuka eventually realizes I'm talking to my robot that I think's a doll. I'm playing with dolls. I have become the very thing I hated. Anyway, I think it's very interesting that, yes, she gets that bit from Rei, rejects it, says it's ridiculous, slaps Rei for the whole thing, hates her doll-like behavior, but then goes and talks to her Ava. Like I said, granted, at this point she's isolated herself from everyone else, so she might as well talk to it, but it definitely suggests that Rei's right, that she does know somewhere on a base level she has that her Ava has a heart, that has something she needs to connect to, something she needs to bridge the distance to. So the fact that she's continuously losing her sync rate at the same moment she is pushing everyone else away is no coincidence at all, right? You're not going to be able to unsee that? What, the crab? I could not see it. I actually remember it from before, so it always bothers me when Unit 2 shows up and just it's a crab's head on a man's body. And anyway, let me find the other few things. We are going to try to cut off on right time, and I know I've skipped right past the actual part where she gets the mind beam. So let me find it. We'll skip straight to that because that's the actual important thing. Like I said, Asuka kind of Asuka disobeys, right? Just following orders makes her a doll, so she
So she bucks her orders and decides she's going to be the one on point and runs out there. We once again have a moment of Maya disapproving of Ritsuko. I didn't realize how many of these shots existed until I started going through this. So, anyway, Shinji is, I guess the key part of Shinji not coming out here, of being grounded, is that no one can come to save Asuka, right? Except the doll, Rei. And anyway, I'm just trying to skip ahead to where the actual psychological attack begins to affect Rei. She fires wildly. She's obviously she was never going to win this. They discovered very quickly that nothing was going to, none of these weapons were going to work. But they talk all about this psychological contamination, and we know we're about to, for the first time, finally go into Asuka's head. After spending time in Rei's head, spending time in Shinji's head, it's Asuka's turn, and in a terrible way. Sorry, I'm trying to find one particular segment. Like I said, I wasn't prepared as well today. Well, so we'll just start with this. She doesn't want to look into her mind. Stop raping my mind. I mean, this is a very... See how... they do a lot here to try to emphasize how this is more than just like, oh, I'm being attacked. This is really beyond the... is really beyond just unpleasant memories, right? But what I guess is worth talking about, because we keep bringing it up, is we do seem to have this progression. And someone says it, that's what I was looking for, I couldn't find it. We do have this progression of the angels doing things which, and people even ask, are they trying to understand Are they trying to understand humans? Are they trying to reach across the gap and understand? So after taking Shinji into the shadow, right, and talking about that, after why am I forgetting the other one? Oh, infiltrating the Magi. After taking over Unit 3, and then apparently trying to take over Unit 0 from the same time, we have this escalation of things they seem to be doing to get into human's mind. I'm sorry, Risco says it somewhere, I just couldn't find it. And now we have this direct invasion of her mind, a very violent, they use rape, that's the term they go for, and she'll later feel defiled and dirty, which is, a very common reaction to physical rape. This is, the angels seem to be trying to get at human minds, but it's not gentle, right? Yeah, and there's a soundtrack too. It all happens to Hallelujah, right? The Hallelujah chorus. But it seems, considering they're angels and are on high, that's actually like some soundtrack dissonance, right? That contrast is being invoked on purpose. That it really... This might be like being touched by the divine, and the mind reels, right? Yeah, it's very, and it keeps playing. It just keeps playing, and it makes the whole scene so like surreal, right? Yeah, but it's definitely dissonance. It's definitely like, and the angel's it's very angelic looking. It's very celestial looking. It seems like a being apart. It no longer seems biological at all. But when they're trying to get Asuka out of there, she's obviously having her mind defiled here. She says,
she won't withdraw. She absolutely will not. She'd rather die than retreat now. That um, at this point, she can't handle another setback. She can't handle one more instance of her falling short. Um, and even at the cost she's paying, right? She won't consider that. And again, she's bucking authority, right? Um, and so, yeah, this is where she is. She has this breaking point where she can't go forward or backwards, right? She cannot admit defeat one more time, and she's willing to sit there and take this onslaught rather than entertain that, rather than admit it. Yeah, and she starts the whole fight thinking that she screws it up this time, she won't get to pilot anymore, and that is part of her identity too, right? So yeah, this is the hill she's chosen to die on, basically. And so I don't know. There is some resilience, I guess, to Asuka if you want to look at it that way, but this mental onslaught wouldn't have had the same outcome at a different point in the series, right? She wouldn't have been at risk. She would have fallen back, right? She falls back from like the Sea of Direct, like the giant shadow, right? So it's not like she can't stomach the idea of retreating, right? So if this had happened earlier, if this had happened while she was still more connected to everyone else and therefore more connected to her Ava, and maybe it doesn't happen this way, but because she feels it's this or nothing, she stays and she takes it, right? Her identity is just based on these few things: not being a doll, being an adult and therefore not childlike, not doll-like, and being an Ava pilot. And all those things together are where she is forming her. Oh, there it is. There's where Ritsuko makes the comment. As the ray is scanning for her mental wavelength, so is it trying to understand the human mind? The fact that it seems to be able to play her memories like they're on a tape deck suggests that maybe it's actually, maybe it is being successful here. I want to find. I'm really trying to wrap up. Sorry, so there is actually enough time. You can see how her memories are mixing with the present, and there's a good example where she takes the doll that she's given, which she, of course, tears up, little monkey, and of course it comes from her surrogate mother, so doubly terrible, and she doesn't want it. She's not a kid, whatever. She stomps on it, but she's not the kid stomping on it, right? That is Asuka of the present. That is Asuka in her plug suit, and so I'm going to grow up fast. I don't need stuffed animals. So again, the being an adult, skipping past childhood, core to her identity, but it means her identity is essentially trying to just not be the thing she was before, or feeling the way she did before because of her mother, being back in that situation where she doesn't have power, where she doesn't seem to have autonomy, where she is doll-like, where she could be confused for a doll. And so if you think of this whole episode as realizing that Asuka's sense of self is dependent upon her being all the things that a doll is not. Doesn't blindly obey orders, not childlike, not unemotional, not compliant, not young, right? And and being an Ava pilot, that's not something a doll can do, a kid can do. I said it's evidence of her progress. It's evidence of her growing up. Of course, the terrible thing we find out from this is that her mother killed herself, and Asuka apparently witnessed it. We have the really creepy doll that talks to her. Like, this wasn't, disturbing enough. And what that initiates, when the doll asks her who she is, it's like I was saying in chat, she is definitely, the facade's being stripped away. She is having to, um, you have this kind of repetition where, who are you? And the answer that is all um, these things, and she tries to reject that she's not all these. I don't know, these things that she seems to have built her identity overall. I forget how many times it repeats. It's like 6 times. It's a lot. But yeah, so you are talking about whether it is, if some of these characters in her mind are the angel speaking to her. What's up, her voice changing every time? Yeah, I mean, it's like, all those are not the real Asuka, right? And so it just kind of hammers her. Yeah, floor changes each time. It's like, and each time she rejects that, no, that's not who I am. And at the very end, if I can find it, because it repeats over and over again. Hold on. Maybe it's more than 6 times. This is compelling Twitch streaming, I realize. Alright, so there's the whole weird thing with the train station and the shadowy figures who then seem to be... whatever, the person she's fixating in all this is Kaji. But the memory she immediately connects to is the fact that she can't connect to Kaji the way she wants. Remembers smelling the lavender, and then remembers the memory of being told she's just a kid. And then to have Shinji in here. Alright. The freaking contrast there, right? Yeah, I know. I mean, relative to the amount of time, but in that moment where she's reaching for Kaji, and Kaji, Mr. Kaji, help me, and she's latched onto him, smells the lavender, and separates, and then remembers that he said she was just a kid. The person who's actually there in that moment is Shinji. It's like, and she's immediately upset at that, but it's like, Kaji's the one you kept trying to connect to, and you can't. Here is actually the person you could have connected to. Here is the actual person. Yeah, so you are talking about the thing. I'll catch up to you in a second. And so the contrast there is like, you actually can't get the connection you want from Kaji. You couldn't, but you could get something like that from Shinji. She rejects it, and when that happens, she runs through all these memories of when that happens, and her accusing Shinji for not taking the opportunity she provided to close with him, right? The Wall of Jericho thing from earlier, the kiss. You won't even hold me? That's very honest, right? Where there are, in fact, all these opportunities, and now we got nightmare fuel as well. Even her subconscious realizes that she kept trying to give Shinji an opportunity to close that gap, and part of what she's mad at him about is that he didn't hold her. Yeah, you won't even hold me. That's very, very telling, right? So yeah. So you were talking about why she has a different voice and the difference of repetition. Yeah, so a couple of different ways to read that, honestly. I mean, they did have different... I guess they brought in all the voice actresses. I don't know if it was all the voice actresses to do the different lines, but Um, there is the thing about different versions of people who live in others. So, like, are those the versions of Asuka that live in other people? Is that how they know her? And she's like, no, that's not me. Because I think each one of those is a different front of hers, right? Um, but it's also like, it's also a defense mechanism, right? That front. And so having it exposed as a front that way makes her feel vulnerable. Like the whole time it cuts between it, she's saying, no, that's not me. She's like holding herself, like she's trying to defend herself and cover herself. Yeah, you won't even hold me. I mean, she wanted him to break down the wall of Jericho. She wanted him to hold her when she kissed him. She wanted him to breach that distance. She keeps, and in that moment where she looks for Kaji and it's actually Shinji there instead, she's so upset because Shinji hasn't done any of those things. And we have this with all of the, and in this point, one of the things the angel's doing is stripping away the distance she's put herself between herself and her childhood. And when after she says that you won't even hold me, she's like, nobody does, nobody. Here's all these childish drawings of violence and separation and whatever, and then you get little baby screaming Asuka, right? Someone please look at me. Yeah, then we get, and then she actually is all stripped away, right? And what I want to point out about that, if I can get to it. Yes. Okay. So people were already talking about this as well. I want to bring it up anyway, though. Something I find interesting. Having stripped all that away, having broken the distance she put between herself and her childhood, not all the fronts, not just the, I'm a woman, I'm a pilot, I'm not a doll, blah blah blah. It ends with her in this scene on a playground as grown Asuka with no clothes on, right? Like she has actually had all that stripped away. But I just do want to point out she is in fact still wearing the interface, right? She's still got her little red ears on. So even stripping all that away, that's still something she's holding on to. Now, she'll be confronted by a little girl version of herself holding a doll that has not been torn up, the same one she did earlier. And this, I think it's a reasonable interpretation that this is actually the angel having found a way to communicate with her, right? And that even this attempt to close to her is something she rejects, right? So yeah, I that's an interpretation I've heard before, and I think that's probably valid. That even that is not a connection she's interested in. So anyway, sorry. Yeah, so again, we have this bit where she's where she feels dirty, she feels defiled. Again, she's reacting to this mental raping in a similar way to rape victims, where she feels defiled, where she feels dirty. Again, I think the music plays through all this, doesn't it? Anyway. So, that's the main thing. Asuka's breakdown. Talking about all that. There's still a little bit at the end, but there are just tiny world building things we'll just talk about, so we'll make sure no one is confused about it. He sends Rei after the lance of, or the spear of Longinus, whatever they're calling it. And Misato objects because she believes that if the Eva makes contact with Adam, that might cause third impact, right? And what she picks up on is he doesn't answer, he doesn't blink, right? And she's able to figure out from that that's a lie, that is not, in fact, what will cause third impact. Which then, of course, means the second impact wasn't caused by contact with an angel. It means something else. So she knows, even still, there is one further mystery, and that'll help galvanize her in a minute. Now, when Rei actually does go down and grab the spear, which I might be able to find on short notice. Gendo makes this comment about we can't turn back the hands of the clock, but we can push them forward. Nice. It's a nice perspective on that. One of the things Fiotsky will accuse him of during all this is that he was looking for a pretext to use this. So, anyway. When Rei actually goes to take out the lance, and Gendo and Fiotsky are still having their conversation in the background. When she takes out the lance, what happens, and this I think is also something that might not be if you have the older version, I don't think this might be in your versions, is that it grows, that the legs come out, which seems to imply that the spear was halting growth or was halting regeneration, right? That angel couldn't behave like normal with the spear in it. So, of course, we don't know enough about it to know exactly what's going on, but yeah, I'm pretty sure that's not in the old version. That was one of the things I do remember being in Death and Rebirth. So it may be that that's all it is that the versions we are getting in 1 through 26 are going to match what's in the Death True thing, but we'll see. Yeah, that one I especially remember is not in there. We'll see if another very infamous scene is in these later ones or not. Anyway, very last thing, Rei tosses the Lance of Longinus. It pierces through everything. It's able to go through the AT field, so that we know this is a weapon. This is obviously a trump card, right? It unwraps for a minute. We noted before it has a little bit of this double helical shape to it, and when it's actually making contact with the AT field, it kind of unwraps into the spiral before essentially rocketing through, which kind of reminds me, it's just my interpretation here, since it already has kind of a DNA, RNA-like structure, it kind of reminds me of the way DNA replicates, which is to unwrap itself and create a copy and re-entwine. I don't know. That's just the way it does that. It reminds me of that process. So yes, it's also a drill. It's the drill that pierces the angel, at least. But the result of all this is that the lance is lost. It leaves Earth orbit. It ends up in lunar orbit, I believe. Yeah. And the very last thing. Yeah. This is it. This is the last thing. We're going to take a break. Asuka, not okay in the head, but physically unharmed. Watching them carry her Ava away. And Shinji does come to her to say check on her. Something he couldn't do for Misato, right? Tries to close the gap.
not even close to okay, but the thing seems to be most upset about is being saved by Ray, being saved by the doll, right? Um, and to the point that she wishes she has died instead. And so the result of all this is that the Asuka from earlier on, who is descending into rejecting everyone and becoming hateful, she's turned one more notch up. Um, yeah. Yeah, so now Ray has eclipsed Shinji as a target of hate. Of course, the thing for Asuka is she both loves and hates Shinji, right? And so, but she doesn't have any of that with Ray, so it can very easily just be all hate. So, yeah, the caution tape again, the barriers. We'll get another one of those. It's very, again, over and over again, characters have opportunities to close the distance between them. It's not for a lack of opportunity. It's never, and sometimes it's not even a lack for trying, but yeah, it just keeps not happening, and it interferes with the way they pilot. And so someone's talking about how it seems to beggar belief that there wouldn't be more mental health care for the pilots, considering how important it is that they be with it. Anyway, we sped up pretty well, but we still went over. So what let's do is I'll compromise. We'll start the next stream 15 minutes late. How about that? That'll be enough time for people to still watch stuff and do other things. So now, the lack of mental care, depending on how you want to interpret this with a capital I, does that make a commentary on modern Japan or the modern world about mental health? Don't know. It does seem odd, right? That there's not more, that there's not an entire department whose entire purpose is to attend to the well-being. So, yeah, and again, one of the things I talked about way back at the beginning of this was how Evangelion decides to take the trope of teenagers being the ones who pilot the giant robots, which is often just a thing, just a contrivance, because to make the protagonist the same age as the audience, they take that idea of what would it really be like to have a bunch of adolescent, confused identity, wrestling with puberty, and put them in charge of humanity and put them in these stressful life or death situations. What would that actually be like? And unpleasant is the answer, right? Yeah. Yeah, that's it. It's just, this is where the budget went, That was the last line on the budget was mental health, and sorry, we had to use it for more Avas and more Geofronts. Okay, like I said, I am not going to moderate an all spoiler discussion. I'm going to take a break and see if I can get a little better prepared for the next episodes. We will start the next one 15 minutes late. Okay, so whatever it says down there for you, because the little panel down there will convert it to your time zone. Whatever it says down there, 15 minutes later. I won't make it early, so you can take that time if you need. You won't miss anything. I'll tweet out to the actual start time, closer to time. But yeah, that you're surprised Asuka didn't try to take comfort in Shinji. Now she can't. Now she's put the walls back up that she had been slowly working through, and part of her realizes she screwed that up, and I think it's part of the reason she hates herself, right?
take care of my own mental health first, Theta. Monday is going to be that's going to be Theta's day. He's going to actually Theta won't exist that day. The alter ego gets that day. Um, yeah, I do apologize. Like I said at the beginning, I do apologize for how unprepared I've felt for a lot of these shows. This is such a big show to deal with, and the desire to show you very specific things and still keep it coherent has not been met. With against the desire of wanting to be able to see what people are saying and interact. So, but the goal of this, in addition to going through Evangelion, the only way I probably ever would have. Thank you, I appreciate it. I mean, I'm not trying to like denigrate myself here. It's just I probably could have done some things differently to be better prepared for this. So. But it's such an interesting show to go through. It's such a seminal work. It's hard to even reset ourselves back to the time where this didn't exist and how much influence it's had on anime. I mean, just you can hardly measure it. And so this is a very drive-by way of doing it. But I'm so glad so many people have had their own thoughts and asked their questions and worked it out in chat, or we've talked about it. And just the outside perspective is very helpful. That's almost kind of like meta relevant to the themes in this show, right? So, yeah, I mean, a lot of people, the show's older than they are, right? So, I'm surprised I can still talk. I think it's because I'm so much closer to the mic. I don't have to project like I do when I'm doing the YouTube stuff, which is what really hurts me. You can tell I don't have nearly the same enunciation. So yeah, nearly the same variance in my tone. How do I still stand? I stand all the time. I like to stand. So I mentioned the other day the alter ego is intermittent fasting. That's because I have put on like 30 pounds over the course of doing this show. And that's because I went from being a guy who went to the gym 6 nights a week to being a guy who worked on anime videos 6 nights a week with expected results. So I'll sound different. That's good. There is something wrong with the audio on the YouTube videos. I have no idea what in the chain is screwing up, so I'm actually recording the mic's output in a separate way today, so maybe that'll be better. But sounds like I traded off. Yeah, well, I'm gonna try and do both here shortly. So, because my mind works better when I'm in better shape, and I can tell. I can look at old videos where I was doing this off the top of my head, and I can tell I'm not as sharp as I used to be. All right. It is right at the time, so we are going to take now a 1 hour and 1 hour 15-minute break. Still enough time to watch both. I'm kind of splitting the difference with you. So 15 minutes later than what's scheduled down there. Yeah. So GoTech, what's happening is I'm recording it live into OBS at the same time, and something about that process is crunching the audio because I can hear it's not that bad in the VODs. So what I'm doing instead is going to record the output just the same way I normally record my voice, and that way it won't even go through OBS. It should be especially clear. So it'll only be from today's on. I can't fix that for the last ones. So all right, 1 hour 15-minute breaks. So the audio is low. Yeah, the video in the past. I might end up doing that for the unedited ones. But anyway, let us take a break. Let me get on to my thing. Make sure everyone has enough time. I'll try to mess with the output here. Just don't want to peek, because then it'll screw things up. Alright. We'll put the little end thing on, and I'll see y'all back here. See if I can figure out what I'm doing over here.